You trusted them, not blindly, not naively. You trusted them the way you trust people who have been present, who have shown up, who have sat across from you in the moments that mattered and said the right things. You shared your plans with them. You talked about the future, the real future, the one you don't show everyone. You let them into the part of your life that most people never see. And then something strange started happening. Slowly, so slowly you almost didn't notice it. The support that used to feel warm started feeling slightly different. The conversations that used to energize you started leaving you with a faint unease you couldn't name. The enthusiasm when you shared good news started arriving a half-second too late, or carrying a quality that didn't quite match the words. And when you started moving, when the thing you had been building started becoming real, the person who had been most present became somehow slightly less available. But they were still smiling. So you told yourself you were imagining it. You told yourself that you were being unfair, paranoid, ungrateful for the support they had given you. You reminded yourself of the times they had been there. You found reasons to explain away the feeling that something had shifted, and you kept sharing, kept trusting, kept handing access to someone who had quietly become something other than what you believed them to be. You never saw it coming, because you were looking for hostility, and what you got was a smile. This is the specific architecture of the most common and most costly betrayal available in any human life. Not the dramatic kind, not the sudden reversal, not the declared enemy, not the conflict you could see and therefore prepare for. The slow kind, the kind that operates in the gap between what someone shows you and what they are doing with what you show them. The kind that requires your trust to function and therefore works hardest to maintain the appearance of deserving it. Most people believe that enemies look like enemies, that hostility arrives with visible hostility, with coldness, with conflict, with the unmistakable signal that someone is not on your side, that the people who want to see you fail will somehow look like people who want to see you fail. This belief is one of the most expensive ones you carry, because the most dangerous threats in any human environment almost never arrive as conflict. They arrive as proximity, as interest, as the specific warmth of someone who wants to be close enough to watch. Think about what envy actually looks like when it is operating in a real relationship. It looks like curiosity. They ask about your plans with an attention that feels like care. They want to know the details, the timeline, the strategy, the obstacles you are navigating, and you interpret this attention as investment, as the specific engagement of someone who is rooting for you. What it sometimes is, instead, is surveillance. The monitoring of someone who needs to know how far you are getting and how fast. It looks like advice. They offer perspective on your decisions. Careful, considered, thoughtful perspective that always seems to arrive at a conclusion that involves you slowing down, reconsidering, waiting for better conditions. The advice is rarely obviously wrong. It is calibrated just carefully enough to be plausible. But its consistent direction, toward delay, toward doubt, toward the ceiling that keeps you within a range they can manage, is visible only in retrospect. It looks like concern. They worry about you, about whether you are taking on too much, moving too fast, risking more than is wise. The concern is expressed with genuine seeming care, but the concern never quite resolves. It escalates proportionally with your progress, arriving most urgently precisely when you are closest to something real. And it looks like friendship, the most dangerous version of all, because friendship provides cover. It creates a context in which the surveillance feels like intimacy, the advice feels like loyalty, the concern feels like love. And inside that context, the monitoring and the subtle sabotage and the consistent undermining of your confidence can operate for months or years without ever being named for what it is. Machiavelli understood this with a precision that centuries have not diminished. He wrote that the most dangerous men at court were not the declared enemies, those you could see and therefore manage. The most dangerous were the ones who smiled, who positioned themselves as allies, who stayed close enough to monitor and influence while maintaining the appearance of loyalty. The declared enemy announces himself. The smiling one never does. The signs were there. They were almost never dramatic. That is what makes them so easy to miss and so unmistakable in retrospect. There was the compliment that somehow left you feeling smaller than before it arrived. The specific kind of praise that acknowledges what you did while subtly framing it as less than it was. "That's really impressive for someone who just started," or "I'm surprised it worked out, I had my doubts," or the version that arrives with a comparison you didn't ask for and didn't need. These compliments are not accidents. They are calibrated. They offer the social performance of support while delivering the actual function of diminishment. And they are designed to be deniable. If you named them, they would sound like you were being oversensitive about a compliment. There was the question about your plans that never quite felt like simple curiosity. That arrived with a specific quality of attention, too focused, too interested in the timeline, too curious about the obstacles. Questions that felt less like someone asking because they wanted to see you succeed, and more like someone mapping the terrain of your ambitions. You answered them because they were framed as care, and each answer handed over information that you would have protected if you had understood what it was going to be used for. There was the advice that always arrived at the same place. The friend who consistently, across every situation, found the reason to counsel caution, who always had a concern about the timing, a worry about the approach, a story about someone else who had tried something similar and paid for it. Individually, each piece of advice was defensible. Cumulatively, the direction was unmistakable, toward the version of your future that stayed within reach of what they could handle. And there was the disappearance. Not dramatic, not announced. The subtle reduction of availability that began exactly when you started to move. The response times that lengthened. The enthusiasm that cooled. The version of them that had been present when you were struggling becoming somehow less reachable when you started to succeed. As if your progress had made you in some way less interesting or more threatening. These patterns only make sense when you see them together. Each one individually is explainable. As a pattern, they tell a story that only one explanation fits. And the story was always there. You just needed distance to read it. Here is what the distance reveals. The pattern was not random, it was consistent. It was consistent across different contexts, different moods, different circumstances. The advice that counseled delay was always present when momentum was building. The availability that diminished was always tied to your advancement, rather than to their circumstances. The enthusiasm that arrived too large was always in response to wins that were already visible and therefore already safe to celebrate. The pattern had a shape, and the shape pointed in one direction. The person who learns to read this pattern early enough changes the outcome. Not by confrontation. Confrontation rarely produces what people imagine it will, but by recalibration, by quietly adjusting what is shared, what is protected, what is revealed before it is complete, by becoming, in relation to this specific person, slightly less available than before, not dramatically, precisely, in the specific ways that deny the monitoring, without announcing that the monitoring has been recognized. Here is the thing that changes everything about how you understand this. The envy is almost never about you. This is the insight that transforms the way you respond to it. Because if it were about you, if it were a verdict on your worth or your deserving, the appropriate response would be defense or hurt, or the specific injury of someone who has been judged unfairly. But it is not about you. It is about the story they tell themselves about their own life, about who they are and what they are capable of, and what they deserve. A story they have been telling for years, about why they haven't moved, why they haven't risked, why they are where they are instead of somewhere else. Your success doesn't threaten them, it threatens the story. Because every time you advance, every time you build something real, every time you convert your potential into an actual result, you become a piece of evidence that the story is wrong, that the conditions they cited as impossible were not impossible, that the risk they avoided was avoidable, that the choice they didn't make was a choice rather than a necessity. They are not watching you because they hate you. They are watching you because you have become a mirror. And the mirror is showing them something about themselves that the story was designed to prevent them from seeing. This is why the envy intensifies as you progress. In the early stages, when your ambitions are still abstract, they can dismiss them. When the thing is still theoretical, it poses no threat to the narrative. But as it becomes real, as the results arrive, as the distance between where you started and where you are becomes visible, the mirror gets harder to avoid. And the person who cannot look away from it, and cannot bear what it shows them, will do what people do when the mirror tells them something they are not ready to hear. They will try to break it, not with a hammer, with a smile. Understanding this changes your response entirely. The person who is operating from envy is not your enemy in the way that word usually implies. They are someone in pain, the specific, unacknowledged pain of someone whose self-narrative is being contradicted by your existence. That does not mean you owe them your vulnerability, your plans, or your continued trust. It means you can withdraw what they have been using without the weight of personal injury. You are not protecting yourself from a threat. You are simply declining to be the mirror that shows them what they cannot bear to see. Machiavelli understood something that most people learn too late and too expensively. Not every plan needs to be announced. Not every ambition needs a witness. Not every victory needs to be explained to the people who were hoping it wouldn't arrive. The prince who speaks freely about his intentions, he wrote, gives his adversaries the one thing they need most: time to prepare. The prince who moves quietly gives them nothing: no target to undermine, no timeline to disrupt, no weakness to exploit before the result makes exploitation impossible. This is not about becoming secretive or cold, or the specific performance of mystery that some people mistake for strategy. It is about something simpler and more fundamental, about understanding that the gap between intention and completion is the most vulnerable moment in anything you are building, and that the people who most want to see you fail are most effective in that gap, before the result exists, when doubt is still possible, when the right question at the right moment can redirect everything. The person who shares everything shares more than their plans. They share the specific shape of what they are afraid of, the doubts they are managing, the obstacles they are navigating, the version of the future they are trying to build, and the version they are afraid of arriving at instead. And in sharing those fears, however casually, however incidentally, they hand a map to anyone who has learned to read it. Move in silence. Let the result speak, not because silence is inherently virtuous, because the result that arrives without warning cannot be undermined in advance, because the victory that nobody saw coming cannot be argued against in preparation, because the version of you that shows up already having done the thing is harder to doubt than the version of you that is still talking about doing it. Some people applaud the result and quietly root against the process. The ones who are genuinely for you celebrate both. Learning to tell the difference is one of the most valuable skills available in any human environment. And the most reliable way to perform that test is to give them less access to the process. Not from distrust, from discernment. There is a practical test. Share something small and observe what happens to it. Not a decoy, something real but contained. Watch how it travels. Watch whether it returns to you changed. Watch whether the person who received it uses it in the way that someone who is genuinely for you would use it. The results of this test are more reliable than any amount of reassurance, any number of kind words, any performance of loyalty that has not yet been tested by the thing that reveals all performances for what they are. What you find will tell you who gets access to what comes next. And here is what genuine support actually looks like when you encounter it. It does not require you to be struggling. The person who is genuinely for you is equally present when things are going well as when they are going badly. Because their presence is not organized around your need, it is organized around you. Their enthusiasm for your wins is not calibrated to how safe those wins are to celebrate. It arrives the same way when the win is small and uncertain as when it is large and obvious. Their advice, when it counsels caution, is followed by a version of support that remains regardless of whether you take the advice. They are not invested in being right about your ceiling. They are invested in you. This is the person worth finding, worth keeping, worth giving the access that others have forfeited. Not because loyalty should be rewarded with openness as a transaction, but because the person who genuinely wants your success will use what you share to help you build it, rather than to manage their own relationship to it. The problem was never the smile. Understand this before you take anything else from this video. The smile is not the enemy. The smile is information. It tells you something that an openly hostile face never would. That this person has learned that proximity is more useful than conflict. That monitoring requires access. That the most effective interference happens from inside the circle of trust, rather than outside it. The problem was believing that a smile was proof of loyalty. Loyalty is not an expression. It is a pattern. It is visible not in what people say when things are going well, but in what they do when things are hard. Not in the celebration that arrives when your success is already obvious, but in the support that was present when the outcome was still uncertain. Not in the words they offer, but in the direction those words consistently point, toward your growth or toward your ceiling. The people who are genuinely for you exist. They are not rare because people are fundamentally bad. They are rare because genuine loyalty, the kind that survives your success, that does not require your struggle, that is not diminished by your progress, requires a specific quality of self-sufficiency that most people have not developed. The person who is genuinely happy for your success has made peace with their own life in a way that your success does not threaten. They can celebrate you without calculating what your advancement means for their position. These people exist, and they are worth everything. The others, the ones who smile and monitor, who advise and limit, who celebrate in your face and measure in your absence, are not monsters. They are people whose relationship with their own potential has produced something corrosive in how they relate to yours. Understanding this does not require you to become suspicious of everyone. It requires you to become accurate about the difference. The enemy you see coming rarely destroys you. What destroys you is what was sitting across the table, smiling, asking about your plans, wishing you luck, and quietly hoping the luck wouldn't hold. Knowing this does not make you cynical. It makes you impossible to surprise. The next time someone smiles at your success with an enthusiasm that arrives slightly too fast or slightly too large, notice, not with confrontation, with attention. Let the pattern reveal itself over time. Watch what they do when the progress is real, and the result is no longer abstract. Watch what happens to the warmth when the mirror starts showing them something they would rather not see. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to accuse or confront or perform the specific drama of someone who has figured out the game. Simply adjust, quietly, without announcement. Give less access to the process. Protect what is still becoming. Let the result arrive without the advance warning that turns support into interference. The most dangerous enemy always smiles at you. But the person who knows that, who has learned to read the smile for what it sometimes is, carries a protection that no amount of caution or suspicion can provide. Not armor, clarity. And clarity, in the end, is the only thing that makes you truly impossible to reach. Some will smile at your face and you will smile back, but you will know